Paul isn't pointing out the sins of same-sex relationships because he sees them as offensive or uglier or anything worse than anything else. He isn't attacking the sins of others. He's making the point of how badly every single person needs Jesus. He says, we've all sinned. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, Paul lists off that wide variety of sins that we looked at before. It's kind of that strange grouping of everything that he mentions. But then just a couple verses later, after he mentions these weird collective list of things that he calls sin, just a few verses later in verse 15, he says this. He says, here's a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. He draws our attention in. Here's a trustworthy saying. Pay attention to this. Memorize this. This is a powerful thing. And he says Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. That's a big idea, right? And also maybe not that huge of an idea. I mean, it's kind of basic of a Christian idea. Why is he drawing our attention to this? I think it's the next few words. Paul adds this, of whom I am the worst, which I think is so interesting. Paul feels so strongly about this phrase, of whom I am the worst, that he repeats it again in verse 16. He reinforces. If Paul were to choose a title, his title would be Paul the Worst. He's a blasphemer, he's a persecutor, he's an insolent opponent of God. In fact, if you read on in this passage, Paul suggests in this passage that he was saved only to prove that the least deserving person can be redeemed.